City Zoo.
Hello, Maggie. I may be home a little late, babe. I'm expecting a long-distance call from London. Yeah, you know, on that 10 units of Gemini gold bonds.
Gold bonds?
The Gemini issue, remember? 10 units? Well, look, honey, they may be trying to get through to me now, and I gotta hang up, okay? Maggie, I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Mr. Jarrett.
Mr. Jarrett?
Stinky had me climbing the walls.
All we've got on the Chicago flight is in first class, Mrs. Reston.
I'll take it.
You've only got 10 minutes till takeoff. That'll get you in Chicago at 9:30.
You know, she split before we got here. Must have been in a hell of a hurry because she left her mink.
What about the safe?
The safe's empty. What's your pleasure?
The house. Burn it.
Anything else?
Find her.
He says to burn it.
It's a nice place.
It was.
I don't know what I should tell you or what I can tell you. I just need a place to stop and get my head together.
Well, you know you're always welcome here, Maggie.
Can you at least tell us if my brother's all right?
Marty, I can't. I don't know.
I'm gonna get my pipe. I'll be right back.
Look, just relax and don't think about anything, Maggie, okay? Drink your coffee. Hey, when was the last time you ate something? Well, I'm gonna make you some eggs. Thanks, Ann. Marty?
She's here.
You rotten.
Sure. Come to Marty when you're in trouble. You and Ben live the high life. You make a fortune working with the scum, and then you come to us when it blows up in your faces. What right have you to keep Annie and I in this kind of trouble? What right?
Okay, let's go.
No. Come on.
No! Out! No! Let's go.
Get out.
Let's go. You bunch of savages!
Just take it easy. Come on.
You take it entrance, not a cage. The wind of the world hates you pigs! I can't help it.
You know, he really is crazy.
Fact remains, they used this knife on a young girl tonight.
Well, you get it ticketed and then book him. I know his statement's going to sound incoherent, but you take him down anyway. I'm going back upstairs and finish the paperwork.
Mike Stone?
Yes.
Maggie Jarris. Ben Jarris is my husband. Does that mean anything to you?
No. Is there something I can do for you?
Yeah. You can keep me alive and help me nail the people who killed my husband.
Sit down. Now, where did the murder happen?
Somewhere around Morristown, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Don't knock it, I was born there.
Now, why are you telling me this and not the New Jersey police?
Because I had to run for my life. Anyway, I don't know who specifically or why. I wasn't there.
Then how can you be so sure that he was killed?
Because he didn't come home. He called. They had our phone tapped, you see, and we had a code worked out. The key words were gold bonds. Gold meant lay a false trail to Paris. Bonds meant big trouble.
Look, it's almost 3:30 in the morning. Tomorrow I'll put out a missing persons.
Listen, to me, he's dead. I know it. That's how they operate.
Who are they?
The gangsters my husband works for. I mean, you know how organized crime deals with employees who goof.
Can you give me names?
Oh, sure can. Leon Kober, Herman Small, George Anselm. Any one of them could have killed him. You see, my husband is a lawyer and financial consultant. He invests money for people who get it from gambling, prostitution, counterfeiting. If it's illegal, you name it, they're in it. He must have made a mistake of some kind.
And for that they wanted to kill you?
Lieutenant, I'm not paranoid and I'm not punchy. I'm in trouble because I was Ben's private secretary. I know too much. Believe what I tell you. Okay. About a year ago, you got a package in the mail with $25,000 in it, right?
Go on.
The package was followed by a phone call inviting you to spend the money and lay off a dope dealer named Fred Charney. Instead of which you turned it in and arrested him. Correct so far?
So far.
Then they tried to threaten you and bust you up. Now, although you're still poor, you're also still walking around. That marked you heavy and honest for the people Ben works with, and they backed off. That's why I thought I could trust you. Why I'm here. I'm not saying there aren't honest cops around. I just wasn't sure of anybody else.
Kerlox. I'm sorry, I didn't know you had
That's all
somebody
right.
here.
Come on in. This is my partner, Dan Robbins, and this is Mrs.
McCluskey.
Well, if we're going to be any help to you, you're going to have to trust us, both of us.
I don't have any reason to trust him. Not with my life.
I trust him with mine.
Okay, maybe I am getting a little paranoid.
Well, she believes that her husband was murdered and that her own life is in jeopardy. And her name is Jarris, Mrs. Jarris.
And he thinks I'm a cuckoo who's dishing out some of the old magoo to get a little attention. I'm not. In the last 4 years, my husband has laundered and invested over $640 million in racket money.
640 million.
Give or take a few $100,000. Guess now you don't know whether to send for the Marines or a couple of guys in white coats. Look, why don't we quit dancing and let me prove I'm worth saving?
Now, wait, now look, I called and I told you that she was here, right? Now, why wouldn't I tell you where she went if I knew?
Yeah. I guess you would have told us right now, right?
Yeah.
She just grabbed her suitcase and ran out. Well, it's the truth. We don't know where she went.
Well, I guess I have to apologize for the inconvenience I've caused both of you and ask you to take us both to the airport.
Well, sure. I'll take you.
Both of you.
Well, what does my wife have to go?
Both of you.
What else do you know about Ray Andridge?
Friend of yours, used to be a DA, now works sub rosa as a special prosecutor, investigating corporate cover-ups for organized crime on the West Coast. Well, he won't admit it. And he's not going to like having to change the combination on his office safe either.
Mike,
I just want to ask you a question, Ray.
at 4:30 in the morning?
That's what you get for having an unlisted telephone number. Does this make any sense to you? 16 left, twice around to 38, then back to 0.
Where did you get that?
Your office safe.
Yeah, but where did you come up
Better
with it?
question is, where did my source get it? I'll call you in the morning.
It is morning.
Later. Go back and get some sleep.
How can I get some sleep when I know we've been blown?
Find the leak.
Well, here we are. This is my house. On this shorter notice, it's the only place I knew that was safe. Okay with you?
I don't do windows or ironing.
Mrs. Jarrett, how did you know that combination?
Ben made it a habit to listen, pick up pieces of information we could use if we had to prove our credibility quick.
Well, you proved it by me. I'll get things started first thing in the morning. Good night.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, you really are an old hand at this, aren't you?
Believe it.
Look, nobody knows you're in San Francisco, and nobody knows you're here, so why don't you accept that fact, and maybe you'll sleep better.
I plan to do that if I don't pass out first. Where do I sleep? Thanks, Mike. Oh, and the only thing to do with me in the morning is stay clear till I've had my coffee. Good night.
Good night.
What time is it?
7:30.
7:30. You get any sleep?
Enough? Juice?
Would you mind if I cook the eggs? I'd like to get even with you for this coffee. So, whose room did I sleep in, or shouldn't I ask?
Well, that was my daughter's room.
Oh, yeah, I saw a picture. Pretty girl. Ben wanted kids. I couldn't have them. Damn shame. Hope you like scrambled.
Fine.
I'm trying to start talking to you, Mike, and I'm not making it. Why don't you ask me some more questions?
We can do that later, Mrs. Jarvis.
Mike, I've slept in your house, I've knocked your coffee, and I'm cooking your breakfast. I should at least be Maggie by now, no?
All right, Maggie.
So, what happens now?
First, we'll pump you for all the information we can get on mob infiltration into San Francisco. And since I think it's important information, important enough for the federal authorities, I placed a call into a federal attorney friend of mine.
You sure you can trust him? Okay, Mike. I don't handle fear and panic very well. I'm trying. Wish it would rain. I always hang together better when it's raining. So what about this federal attorney?
He'll take you into his custody and get all the information he can. And then you'll just have to make a deal with the government. You might go on trial, or they can give you a whole new identity. Maybe even a new face if you wanted it. After that, it's all over.
I won't last that long.
Don't worry. Take it easy. Just my partner. Hi.
Morning, Mrs. Jarvis.
Maggie.
Maggie.
What did you find out?
I woke Crowley up.
Who's Crowley?
Well, he's head of our organized crime and intelligence unit.
He met me at the office, and we made our connection through OC&I, as you suggested. Mike, maybe we should,
Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm a big girl. Frightened, but all grown up. Whatever you found out, I want to hear it.
There's an all points out in Jersey for Maggie and her husband.
What's the charge?
Nothing. Both their house and office were torched. Completely gutted.
Oh, my God.
And what word have you got on Ben Jarvis?
Nothing.
Hello. Who happened to make the call to Jersey?
Crowley talked to the state police. I talked to Morristown to follow up on the fires.
Well, maybe it would have been better if he had done both.
Well, you wanted me here with the information by 7:45. There wasn't enough time.
You get your things together. We've got to get you out of here.
How could they know she was here?
Well, if they had a plant in that New Jersey Police Department, it would take them 30 seconds to find out who you are, who your partner is. And since we don't belong to organized crime intelligence, well, you made the call. It's obvious. Maggie's with us. We're going to have to move her to one of our safe houses. That'll take about, 3 security units. I'll go downtown and take care of that. You keep her isolated until you hear from me. You got a beeper on you?
Yeah.
Good. Wait for my signal.
If you got an extra deck of cards, I'd like to borrow them.
Sure. Here. Got anything on Ben Jarvis?
Zip. But we did find out something. We got some static about some high-priced hitmen converging on the area.
Figures. See if your contacts can get us names and locations of all the imported talent. And listen, Ed, there's got to be a tight lid on this one. Need to know basis only.
Including my staff?
And mine. Once you interrogate my witness, you'll know the reason why.
Lieutenant, telephoto just came up for you.
Oh, my God.
Now do you buy my tight lid?
You got it.
Thanks a lot.
How scared do you think you'd get if you knew somebody out there wanted to kill you?
Why don't you tell me about Morristown and Ben?
You trying to distract me?
Yeah.
Well, you picked the right thing. Ben. Went to law school, came out top 5th of his class. Somewhere along the way, he met a shy, demure loudmouth who fell crazy in love with him, seduced him, and married him. I was in show business. Wardrobe mistress, no ambition. Happy to carry a shovel and broom and follow the elephants. Then Ben came along and snatched away my unpromising career and turned me into the best-loved woman in the world.
Sounds as though you don't like him much.
How can you like someone who lets you do whatever you want, loves you with his whole heart, respects you enough to disagree with you, and really listens to what you say?
That doesn't sound like the kind of man who spends his life working for racketeers.
Why not? Ben's a good man, but he's not perfect. He makes mistakes. And he made one doozy when he went to work for them. I'd like to tell you they forced him into it, but they didn't. One day, 2 men came to his office and invited him to invest $3 million in their behalf. $3 million. The conditions told him the money was dirty, but I don't have to say any more, do I?
You seduced him?
Hell no. He seduced himself. He knew it, and I knew it, and we lived with it. Up until right now. Where's that boat going, do you think?
It goes around the bay, and it goes around again.
A dull way for the crew to make a living. Look who's talking. Nobody wants to shoot them.
Now, I understand you're all here because you volunteered for hazardous duty. Or is there someone here who didn't? Good. Now, what I've got is an extremely valuable witness who needs protection. We're going to work in pairs, and this witness will be moved at irregular intervals, and you won't know where or when until the final minute, just before the move is made. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah, what makes this hazardous duty, Lieutenant?
Well, we've got one man missing already in Jersey, believed dead. 10 minutes ago, I got this from the Chicago Police Department. It's registered to the witness's brother-in-law. And as far as we know, the brother-in-law and his wife are missing. Now, the price on our witness's head is high enough, and I mean really high enough, to make every low-life worm and hitman try to collect it. That's why I'm calling it hazardous duty. It really is, fellas. Are there any other questions? All right, that's it then. You're all on standby.
After my first day in the world of finance, I realized more time is spent waiting around doing nothing than working. And I figured in the last 13 years, I've won 634 hands of solitaire. Is it hands or games?
Games, I think. That's Mike. Let's go.
These are pictures of the local pros who might be involved in this. This group is of the hitmen who came into town yesterday. There probably are more.
I don't recognize any of them.
I don't either.
Homicide Stone.
Mike, this is Dan.
Six.
I read you.
That was short.
All he had to do was give me a number.
Hey, you booked the numbers? I'll play 862 for Buck.
No, this is a key number. Each key is to a safe house. He said 6. We'll meet him at number 6.
Stone's the one driving.
So how much does it cost?
You know the bit about why Johnny can't read? That's my kid. 12 years old, reads like a second grader. Now I gotta hire a tutor for him on my salary.
And there's a car following us. Better make sure. No mistake. He's still there. Inspectors 8-1 request backup unit. Any unmarked car within the vicinity of 8th and Charles. Proceeding west on Charles. Hold it, stop! Come on! Out! Where's your wallet? What's your name? What's your name? All right, take them both in. Then report to Lieutenant Crowley. Tell him I picked him up for vagrancy. He'll understand. Take him in. Come on, let's go.
guys, could you speed it up a little between knocks? A person could faint from the suspense. What's the matter? You heard something about Ben.
No, it's nothing about Ben. It's your brother-in-law and his wife. Now, you said you wanted the cards straight up. I know it's rough, but... Nobody knows this number.
Could be the phone company or a wrong number.
Or I got suckered. There were two unarmed apes following us, easy to spot, too easy. We busted them, and then I came straight here. That was my mistake. There could have been a second car.
Why don't we answer it and find out?
Oh, there's no need for that. Where's your car?
It's right up front.
All right, you go to it. See if you can spot anyone watching the building. Then get in your car, drive it into the garage, and park it right next to mine. If anybody's watching this building, they're gonna have to guess which car Maggie's gonna be driven out in. I want you two to check out the garage. Here, start my car. I'm gonna give you a 30-second lead. Maggie, don't you worry about a thing. You've got a small army taking care of you. Everything's gonna be all right. Maggie?
Folding up like a wet tissue. What's the matter with me? Where to?
Maggie, get in. Lie down.
Haven's hip and shoulder are broken. Some burns, cuts, bruises.
Is he gonna be all right?
Yeah, Dan's on his way in.
What about the bomb squad?
They're already here. They figure it must have been some kind of plastic explosive. No guess yet as to how it was wired up.
Well, you stay there with them.
Yes, sir.
Well, what are you doing here?
Just thought you'd like to know, Mike. Right after I changed the combination on my safe, one of our deputy prosecutors went to lunch and never came back. We checked. He took a plane to Rio.
Good. Now maybe that leak is plugged.
It was worth an in-person thank you, Mike, so, thank you. Oh, Mike, do I ever get to hear more about your source?
Later. Right now, I've got my witness under deep cover.
Right.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Yes.
About those two, neither one of them have given us their names or even contacted their lawyers. Now, we got a make on the gray-haired one. He's Louis Pard from Newark. 9 arrests, no convictions. Here's his file. He doesn't know we know about him yet.
What about the other man?
Nothing. FBI came up with nothing at all. Not even a military ID. We're checking on all DMVs who require thumbprints for their driver's registration.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ed.
They're all yours, Mike.
Homicide Stone. Who am I talking to? Just a minute. Wait till I get a pad and pencil. All right, I'm ready. When? Who do I look for? Well, that was someone who says he can tell me everything I want to know about Ben Jarris. Wants me to meet him at 3:30.
You going?
That depends on what we can get out of those two guys first. Come on. All right, bring him in here. You take one of them and I'll take the other one. Come on, sit down. Well, I understand you've got a couple of big secrets, like who you are and where you came from.
I'm not sure what your routine is, mister. Maybe you can help me. Are you trying to convince us that you can't speak? Is it that you can't hear or speak? That's a no-no. I'm opposed to garbaging up the air any more than it is. Now, why don't you just tell me your name?
No answers to the questions. All right. Maybe I can help you. Your name is Louis Pard, and you came from Newark.
I'm getting nothing.
Neither am I.
What they're doing may not be so stupid, Mike. You didn't find any weapons on these guys, and we have no charge to lay against them. So unless they turn out to be wanted somewhere else, we're just gonna have to turn them loose without them...
Wait a minute now. Why do you say that?
What are we gonna hold them on?
Let me ask you something. Would you consider a man who doesn't know his name mentally competent to be turned out into the street?
No, I wouldn't.
So what would you do?
Notify the courts.
Uh-huh. Now you're cooking. And the court sends him to a state hospital for observation for 30 days. No bail possible. They're off the streets under maximum security for a whole month. You know, it's the first time I've ever seen a man talk himself into a hole by not opening his mouth. Warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it?
My family wasn't that rich. We couldn't afford cockles.
Oh, well, trust me. If you could have, they would have been warm. Why don't you get Sekulovich to do the paperwork on those guys? I've got to get to the parking lot. I got to pick up Crowley. I'll meet you there. Okay. Which one, Bob?
Oh, this is your car, Lieutenant.
Good, thanks. No, wait a minute. Do you have another car ready to go?
Anything wrong with this one, sir?
No, nothing's wrong. I just wondered if you had another one ready to go.
Sure, any one of these. Take your pick. They're all tuned, ready to go.
I'll take that one. Sign me up for that one over there.
Yes, sir, Mom.
That's Ben. George Anselm. He's a lawyer from Rhode Island, an expert on foreign exchange agreements. Where'd you get these pictures?
The Bureau.
Ben, George, and Leon Kober. Only times Ben and I ever saw Leon was when there was a lot of money involved. Never less than $3 million. Remember I was telling you about the Tevrex Corporation on Market Street? Well, they launder all their money out there. That's the man who runs the whole shebang, and I can prove it.
How?
Copies of contracts, deed transfers, checks. I've got it all on slides, copies of every document we ever handled. Ben took the pictures and developed them himself. The originals are in a vault in Switzerland.
Where are your copies?
In my purse.
Copies of those would be a big help, Mrs. Jarvis.
That's why I brought them. Herman Small, Canadian timber broker. Only his next move is to acquire hotels and restaurants in San Francisco. Ben. The gal with him's his mistress. He was feeling real good that day. Told me the deal he had just closed made the two of us worth a cool $500,000. That's $500,000 the hard way.
Well, judging from what you just told us, in terms of what we know, you just saved us 5 years of tough investigation. And I doubt if we could turn up half that much even then.
I want them all in jail.
Maggie, I'd like it if you turn those slides over to him so that he can have copies made.
I gotta have them back.
I'll give them back to you in an hour.
Okay?
I thank you.
Maggie, I talked to my federal attorney friend, and he said he's flying in this afternoon to take you into his custody. And he also told me that he was going to give you immunity.
You must have put in a good word.
Nope, I did not one word. Dan, yeah. I want you to find a payphone, call Washington, confirm the pickup arrangements for Maggie, will you?
Right.
Oh, and listen, while you're at it, will you check on the special units?
Daniel, I wouldn't hate you if you brought back a big bottle of gin and a small bottle of vermouth. Well, where are you going?
616 West Grover Avenue.
What's there?
A man is there who says he can tell us everything we want to know about Ben.
I'm going with you.
No chance.
Why not?
Because I think it's a setup. I just don't know what kind. And I've already pulled one boner. No, you stay right here.
No sweat, Lieutenant. Myra and I are wide awake.
I'll make sure you stay that way. Keep the door shut and your ears open.
Mike, no matter what happens, you tell it to me straight.
That's our deal. I'll be back as soon as I can.
Okay, guys, which one of you is a better gin player?
I am. Myra's an honest man. I cheat.
Marvelous. So do I. I'll deal. To throw an ace. Doesn't fit my hand.
Well, that's all right, Mrs. J. It doesn't fit my hand either.
Inspector 8-1 to all special units. I am at contact point. Be alert. Ben Jarvis?
Who are you?
Mike Stone.
Stone, there are 2 or 3 gunmen watching us from some of these buildings.
Which ones?
I don't know. You didn't even look.
Am I supposed to?
How's Maggie?
She thinks you're dead.
I am. Poor Maggie. She's probably torn to bits and scared out of her wits.
No, she's holding on.
Yeah, sure, cracking wise. Well, that's just the front, Lieutenant. Underneath, she's all marshmallow.
How did you get to San Francisco?
They brought me private plane. I don't know who the 2 men who were brought me.
Do you know why?
Well, in case they needed a Judas goat to get to Maggie. I'd have been dumped in a swamp if she hadn't run. That was my reprieve. There was a foul up in what should have been a pretty safe business deal. A lot of money was lost, and the whole mess came down on me, so they grabbed me. Thank God Maggie had sense enough to follow the plan.
Look, we've been standing around here too long. What is it you're supposed to do?
Well, either get you to bring Maggie somewhere to meet me, or get you to bring me to Maggie.
They won't start shooting at you when you climb into the car?
Well, that's what they said.
All right, this is my car right here. Come on, let's go.
No, Stone. I'm not going to lead them to Maggie. They'll kill her, too. You know what they tried to sell me? That they only wanted to get Maggie and me out of the country with a guarantee that we'd keep our mouths shut. They knew I wouldn't go for it. But they went along anyway, thinking that I'd buy some time, then try to save myself.
Doesn't sound like a bad plan after all. You just do what I tell you. Come on, let's go.
No. They're not going to get to her because of me. Look, I'm only here to tell you they don't know anything about the slides that Maggie has with her.
What else?
Also, that she should know that they've begun to divest themselves from the business, get out from under. They've even hired another lawyer from Pittsburgh to take over our job. I don't know who he is, but I do know that the last 3 digits in his phone number are 443.
The only chance for you to stay alive is to do what I tell you.
Now, there's no chance for me to stay alive. No chance at all. If I run... What is it?
It's Maggie. Don't look now, but I told you not
to... Oh, my God, Maggie.
Come.
Dear God! Ben! Ben!
Wait here! Ben! Calm down, I said. Take it easy now. Take it easy. I'll get him for you. Over there! Maggie! Maggie!
Leave him alone! Leave him alone! Don't hurt him anymore! Leave him alone! Oh, Ben! Oh, Ben! Ben, don't leave me, please. Please, babe. We got $500,000. What good's it gonna do us now? Please don't leave me.
Hello, John.
Mike.
Maggie Jarvis. John Andela.
Okay.
And my partner, Inspector Robbins.
Well, whenever you're ready to go.
Go where?
Washington, D.C., okay?
Well?
With John and his people, you'll be well protected. Better than well protected.
When it's all over, you get a new name, a new identity.
And plastic surgery. Sure, I know the whole McGilla. Come on, Dan. Odds are it won't last long enough to need a new name and face.
Nah, don't say that. I've known John for a long, long time. My buck says that you're wrong.
You're asking me to bet against myself?
And I only bet on sure things. Am I on?
Sure. A year from today, Mike, if you get a buck in the mail with no return address on it, you'll know I made it. And I'll tell you how I'm going to collect if you lose. If I'm not around, then you take that buck and buy yourself a very dry martini with it. And as you're drinking it, remember that even if it's the worst martini ever made, it's a damn sight better than your coffee. Deal?
Deal.
Well, this is it.
Maggie?
Daniel, if you ever find a girl like Maggie, marry her. Good lady.
In the fall light of San Francisco, when the fog lifts just enough to make the hills look like bruises under a silk sheet, Inspector Mike Stone walks with the heavy patience of a man who has learned that cities age faster than people. And this story, which borrows the bones of the streets of San Francisco, 1972, but grows new flesh of its own, opens not with a gunshot, but with a wedding ring found in the gutter on Vallejo Street, its gold dulled by rain and the slow indifference of passing. Shoes, a ring engraved inside with a promise so old it has become invisible. Till death do us part, a phrase that Stone rolls in his mind as he bends, pinches the metal between thumb and forefinger, and feels the city hum beneath him like a tired animal refusing to sleep. He is thinking about his partner, Inspector Steve Keller, younger, sharper at the edges, still believing that vows mean something if you chase them hard enough, still believing that justice can be measured in arrests rather. Then in nights slept poorly, and Stone almost smiles at the thought before the radio crackles with the address of a body found near the Embarcadero, female, early 30s, signs of struggle, and suddenly the ring is no longer a symbol but a clue, warm with implication, as if the city itself has whispered a secret into his palm. At the scene, gulls scream like bad consciences and Keller kneels beside the body, his jaw tightening as he catalogues bruises that look like fingerprints of regret. While Stone watches the harbor water slap against pylons, thinking how marriage, like the bay, can look calm until it pulls you under, and when Keller looks up, eyes bright with the old hunger to solve, Stone hears himself say, almost gently, "Let's not rush to make this neat," because he has learned that the neat stories are usually lies, and San Francisco, with its Victorian facades and crooked streets, despises lies only slightly less than it despises sentimentality. The victim's name is Elaine Porter, married 7 years to a man who sells insurance and believes in numbers more than people, and as they knock on the apartment door in Nob Hill, Stone notices the way Keller stands a little straighter, as if every case is an audition for the man he hopes to become. And when the husband answers, eyes red but voice controlled, Stone sees the flicker of something he has seen too many times to name without bitterness, the relief of someone whose private war has ended in a public tragedy, and the apartment smells of coffee gone cold and flowers already wilting, the kind of domestic tableau that pretends stability while hiding fractures in the walls. They sit, they ask, they listen, and the husband, Robert Porter, talks about arguments like whether reports, unavoidable, impersonal, insists Elaine had been distant, distracted, volunteering late, seeing friends he didn't know, and Keller presses, sharp and eager, while Stone watches the man's hands, clean, unmarked, clasped too tightly, as if holding on to a version of himself he can still recognize, and Stone thinks about vows again, about how they are recited in churches with stained glass that fractures light into color, and how those colors fade when the doors close. Outside, the city keeps moving, cable cars clang like old jokes, and Stone remembers his own marriage, The way it ended not with a scream, but with a silence that grew until it filled every room. And he wonders if Elaine Porter heard that. Silence, too, if it followed her down to the waterfront, if it pushed her into a meeting she didn't want. The autopsy later will say strangulation, but in this moment, standing in the Porter living room, Stone feels the case tightening like a knot, because the husband's grief is too composed, Keller's certainty too eager, and the city too patient to give up its secrets easily. As they leave, Keller talks about motive, about jealousy, about how love curdles into violence, and Stone listens, nodding because youth needs to speak its theories aloud, but he is already thinking about the ring in his pocket, about where it was found, about how far a woman would walk without it, and whether she took it off or it was taken from her. And in that small distinction, he senses the difference between a crime of passion and something colder. They follow the trail through volunteer rosters and late-night meetings, through a community center in the Mission where Elaine taught English to immigrants, where people remember her laugh and her patience, and Keller's eyes soften as he realizes the victim was more than a name on a report, while Stone feels the familiar ache of knowing that kindness rarely protects you, that sometimes it marks you as vulnerable. And when they learn Elaine had been helping a woman named Rosa Delgado file for divorce from a man who beat her, Stone feels the case tilt, because vows, once broken, can break others by proxy, and Keller's excitement returns. Theory forming, suspect emerging, but Stone cautions restraint, because he has seen how easy it is to punish the wrong man when you are in love with your own logic. The Delgado husband, Manuel, works nights at the docks, his hands scarred, his temper rumored, and when they find him, he is drunk on cheap whiskey and anger, shouting about betrayal, about how his wife has been poisoned against him by outsiders, and Keller moves in fast, words sharp as knives, while Stone hangs back, watching the man's eyes dart not with guilt but with fear, the fear of losing what little power he believes he has left. And when Manuel swears he didn't touch Elaine, that he was working, Stone notes the times, the witnesses, the small details that Keller will dismiss as excuses, and later, in the car, the argument between the inspectors is quiet but tense, Keller insisting that violence begets violence, Stone reminding him that patterns are not proof, that the city loves to tempt you with symmetry. Night falls, fog thickens, and Stone sits alone in his office, the ring on his desk catching the light, and he thinks about the phrase engraved inside, about how it assumes death is the only ending that matters, and he wonders how many marriages die long before the body does, how many people keep walking, breathing, functioning, while something essential has already been buried, and he feels the weight of years, of cases that blurred into each other, of partners lost to promotions or funerals, and he knows that Keller will learn this too, if he stays long enough, if the city doesn't chew him up first. A call comes in, a tip from a bartender who saw Elaine arguing with a man not her husband, a man with gray at his temples and a voice like gravel, and Stone feels the old thrill, not excitement but recognition, the sense that the story is widening, becoming less comfortable, and when Keller arrives, energized, Stone sees in him the mirror of his younger self, and he almost wants to warn him, almost wants to say that some cases change you in ways you can't undo, that some promises, once examined too closely, crumble, but instead he says, let's go, because this is the work, because the city demands witnesses, because until death, or something like it, parts us from our illusions, someone has to keep walking these streets and listening to what they refuse to say. By the time dawn seeps back into San Francisco like a tired confession, Inspector Mike Stone has already been awake for hours, turning the bartender's tip over in his mind the way some men turn worry beads, because the image of Elaine Porter arguing with a gray-templed stranger refuses to settle into any comfortable category. And when Steve Keller bursts into the office with coffee and the kind of restless optimism that pretends sleep is optional, Stone recognizes the familiar rhythm of a case. Entering its second movement, when possibilities multiply faster than certainties and every lead feels like a promise waiting to be broken. The bartender's name is Lou Carver, a man whose bar near North Beach has soaked up more secrets than spilled drinks, and when they find him wiping down a counter already clean, he squints at Stone with the practiced caution of someone who has learned that truth is safest when rationed. But Keller's directness cracks him open enough to produce a description. The man with Elaine wore a tweed jacket out of season, spoke softly but with authority, and leaned in close as if words alone were not enough to carry his meaning, and Stone files this away, thinking how intimacy can be mistaken for menace, how proximity does not always equal threat. Carver remembers the man paying cash, remembers Elaine leaving first, jaw set, shoulders stiff, and remembers the stranger lingering, finishing his drink like a man postponing a decision, and as they step back into the street, Keller talks about affairs, about secret lovers who turn violent when exposed, while Stone listens, hearing instead the echo of his own past. The nights when he stayed out late not with another woman, but with the job itself, choosing work over honesty until the distance at home became unbridgeable. And he wonders whether Elaine Porter had made a similar choice, whether the stranger was not a lover but a mirror, reflecting back a life she was no longer willing to live. The Tweed Jacket leads them to a university lecture hall overlooking the bay, where Professor Harold Weiss holds court with a voice that can make history sound like prophecy, and when Stone and Keller sit in the back, listening, Stone feels the strange dissonance of watching a man perform certainty for an audience, knowing how fragile certainty becomes under questioning. And after class, when they introduce themselves, Weiss's eyes flicker with recognition not of guilt, but of calculation, the look of someone accustomed to being judged by his words, and he admits knowing Elaine through the community center, admits meeting her for drinks to discuss philosophy, ethics, the obligations of marriage, and Keller's skepticism sharpens like a blade, because to him these are the rationalizations of a man who mistakes intellect for innocence. Weiss denies any argument, denies any violence, insists Elaine was troubled, searching, and Stone notes the careful language, the way Weiss distances himself from emotional ownership, and as they leave, Keller explodes with frustration, accusing Stone of being too gentle, too willing to let eloquence masquerade as truth, and Stone, weary but firm, reminds him that eloquence cuts both ways, that it can hide and reveal, and that rushing toward the most dramatic explanation often blinds you to the mundane realities where most crimes are born. The case deepens when Rosa Delgado finally agrees to speak, her eyes ringed with exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep, and she tells them Elaine had been helping her plan an exit, that Elaine spoke of feeling trapped, of promises that felt like chains, and when Keller asks if Elaine feared her own husband, Rosa hesitates just long enough to suggest there were arguments behind closed doors, words that bruised even if fists did not, and Stone feels the old anger rise, the anger reserved for men who wound without leaving marks, because he has seen too many women dismissed as hysterical when what they were was simply unheard. Meanwhile, Manuel Delgado's alibi checks out, the docs confirming his presence with the indifferent precision of punch clocks, and Keller's confidence takes its first real hit. The realization that patterns fail you when reality refuses to cooperate, and Stone offers no consolation, knowing that disappointment is a better teacher than reassurance. Another threat emerges in the form of a life insurance policy recently increased, Robert Porter having doubled the amount only months before Elaine's death, and Keller seizes on this with renewed vigor, money now a motive solid enough to grasp, while Stone considers the timing, the banality of greed, the way it often slips into marriages quietly, disguised as prudence, and when they confront Robert again, the man's composure cracks just enough to let anger leak through, anger at Elaine's independence, at her late nights, at the way she made him feel redundant in his own life, and Stone watches this carefully because anger, once named, can be more revealing than denial. Yet there is still something missing, a gap between motive and action that refuses to close, and Stone feels the pressure of time, of Keller's expectations, of a city that wants its killers identified so it can return to pretending safety is a permanent condition. Late one evening, as fog drapes the streets like a shroud, Stone visits the waterfront alone, standing where Elaine's body was found, listening to the water and the distant hum of traffic, and he imagines her last moments not as a single act of violence, but as the culmination of 1,000 small disappointments, each one a quiet erosion of faith, and he wonders whether the killer understood this, whether the act was fueled by rage or by a colder conviction that some vows, once broken internally, deserved external confirmation. The breakthrough comes not with drama, but with paperwork, a phone record showing calls between Elaine and Professor Weiss that spiked in the weeks before her death, not late-night confessions but daytime conversations, practical, scheduled, and when Stone shares this with Keller, he sees the younger man recalibrate, theory adjusting to evidence, and he feels a small, private pride, the kind that comes from watching someone learn without being told. Confronting Weiss again yields a different story, one less polished, as he admits Elaine had asked him about annulment, about the moral legitimacy of leaving a marriage that had not yet turned violent, and Keller presses, asking whether Weiss encouraged her, whether he played savior, and Weiss bristles, ego wounded, insisting he merely offered perspective. But Stone senses the danger of intellectual influence, the way ideas can push people toward irreversible decisions. Still, influence is not murder, and as they leave, Keller is silent, thinking, and Stone knows the case has entered its most treacherous phase, where everyone is partially culpable and no one fully innocent, where the line between moral responsibility and criminal action blurs. A final piece surfaces when a neighbor reports hearing voices the night Elaine died, not shouting but intense murmurs, followed by a sudden silence, and Keller, replaying timelines, realizes the voices could not have been Manuel's, nor Weiss's, nor Robert's according to their stated whereabouts, and Stone feels the chill of uncertainty deepen. Because when alibis align too neatly, it often means someone else has been overlooked, someone who exists in the margins where police rarely linger. The city, indifferent to their urgency, continues to breathe, cable cars clanging, lovers arguing, vows being made and broken without ceremony, and Stone looks at Keller, seeing not just a partner but a man standing at the threshold between belief and knowledge, and he knows that whatever the outcome, this case will carve something permanent into them both. Because it is not just about who killed Elaine Porter, but about what happens when promises rot from the inside, when till death becomes less a commitment than a threat whispered under the noise of everyday life. And as the night closes in, Stone feels the weight of all the unanswered questions settle like fog, obscuring the path forward even as it demands they keep moving, one careful step at a time, into a truth that will not reveal itself without exacting a price. The third day of the investigation begins with rain tapping against the windows of the Hall of Justice like an impatient metronome, and Inspector Mike Stone listens to it while rereading witness statements, aware that by now the case has developed its own gravity, pulling every detail into a dense orbit where coincidence and intention blur together. And when Steve Keller arrives, damp from the weather and visibly restless, Stone senses the younger man's growing frustration, the subtle shift from intellectual curiosity to personal investment that often precedes mistakes, because Keller is no longer chasing facts alone, but chasing a sense of moral order that the case refuses to provide. The neighbor's report of murmured voices replays in their minds as they reconstruct Elaine Porter's final hours, mapping her movements through streets that now feel accusatory, every intersection a question, and Stone insists they walk it, physically tracing the route from the community center to the waterfront, because he believes the city yields truths only to those willing to feel its terrain under their feet, and as they walk, he points out blind corners, alleys softened by shadow, places where a conversation could turn dangerous without attracting notice, while Keller listens, absorbing not just the geography, but the lesson that crimes are as much about space as they are about motive. They stop at a modest apartment building overlooking a narrow street, where a new name surfaces in the case file: Daniel Mercer, a divorce mediator who had met with Elaine weeks before her death, and Keller's eyes sharpen, sensing momentum, while Stone tempers his expectations, knowing how often new leads promise resolution and deliver only complication. Mercer answers the door with the guarded politeness of a man accustomed to conflict, his office doubling as living space, walls lined with legal texts and potted plants that struggle for light, and he admits meeting Elaine to discuss separation. Insists their relationship was strictly professional, yet his voice carries a tremor that Keller immediately pounces on, pressing about the night of her death, about whether Mercer had feelings that crossed ethical lines, and Mercer bristles, wounded pride surfacing as he denies any impropriety. But Stone watches his hands, noticing a faint bruise along the knuckles, recent, poorly explained by the man's claim of clumsiness. Later, in the car, Keller is energized, convinced they've found their overlooked suspect, while Stone remains cautious, reminding him that bruises can come from many sources, and that desperation does not always manifest as violence, though privately he feels the same unease, the sense that Mercer's involvement represents the intersection of ideals and reality, the place where people who believe in orderly endings confront the chaos of human emotion. The rain intensifies, and with it the pressure to produce answers, as superiors hint at the need for progress, the city's appetite for closure growing impatient, and Stone feels the familiar resentment toward timelines imposed on grief, toward the expectation that loss can be neatly processed if only the right man is blamed. They dig into Mercer's background, uncovering a history of contentious cases, clients who accused him of manipulation, of steering outcomes that align too closely with his personal philosophies. And Keller argues that influence, when abused, becomes coercion, while Stone counters that coercion still requires a breaking point, a moment when someone chooses to cross a line, and the question remains who crossed it and why. Another visit to Professor Weiss yields little beyond wounded ego, the academic retreating into abstraction, insisting that ideas are not weapons unless wielded irresponsibly, and Stone considers how easily responsibility is deflected in intellectual circles, how harm can be dismissed as misinterpretation, while Keller grows increasingly impatient with what he perceives as cowardice disguised as nuance. Meanwhile, Robert Porter hires an attorney, a move that shifts the tone of their interactions, and when Stone sits across from him again, he senses a man fortifying himself behind procedure, grief now armored by legal language, and when confronted with the increased insurance policy, Robert offers explanations of planning and foresight, but his eyes betray a simmering resentment, the kind born of feeling obsolete in a marriage that no longer centered him, and Stone wonders whether resentment alone can kill, whether it can fester quietly until opportunity presents itself. The case takes an unexpected turn when Keller uncovers a parking citation issued to Elaine's car on the night of her death, time-stamped within minutes of the estimated time of the crime and located blocks away from the waterfront, a detail that suggests movement, an interruption in her final journey, and Stone feels the pieces shift again, the realization that Elaine did not go straight to her death but was diverted, drawn into a confrontation that altered her path, and they revisit the area, questioning shop owners, passers-by, anyone whose memory might still hold an impression, and a florist recalls a woman matching Elaine's description arguing quietly with a man near a closed storefront, a man taller, broad-shouldered, not fitting Weiss's or Mercer's profiles, and Keller's certainty fractures once more, replaced by a growing respect for the complexity Stone has been urging him to accept. This new description leads them back to the docks, not to Manuel Delgado but to another worker, Thomas Riley, a foreman with a reputation for volatility and a history that intersects unexpectedly with Elaine's volunteer work, as records show she once testified on behalf of a worker Riley had assaulted during a labor dispute, and Stone feels the cold clarity of motive emerge, not personal passion but wounded pride, the kind that waits patiently for retribution. Riley is found in a bar near the piers, drinking with the grim focus of a man rehearsing his justifications, and when confronted, he initially scoffs, dismissing Elaine as a do-gooder who meddled in affairs beyond her understanding. But under Keller's relentless questioning, cracks appear, anger spilling out in jagged fragments, accusations that Elaine ruined lives with her testimony, that she never paid the price for her interference, and Stone watches, heart heavy because he has seen this before, the way men externalize blame to avoid confronting their own brutality. Yet even as Riley's rage surfaces, the timeline resists alignment, his alibi placing him elsewhere during the crucial window, corroborated by co-workers who have little reason to protect him, and Keller slams a fist against the table in frustration, the realization dawning that motive alone is a labyrinth with no exit. As night falls again, Stone sits with Keller in silence, the city's lights shimmering like distant fires, and he finally speaks of his own past, of a case long ago where he chased the loudest suspect while the truth waited quietly in the background, and he tells Keller that patience is not passivity but discipline, that knowing when not to act is as vital as knowing when to move, and Keller listens, chastened, the weight of responsibility settling more evenly on his shoulders. The next morning brings a subtle but decisive clue, a transit receipt found among Elaine's belongings that indicates she took a streetcar partway to the waterfront before disembarking unexpectedly, and Stone feels a tightening in his chest, because this suggests prearrangement, a meeting planned yet unspoken, and when Keller cross-references this with phone records, a single call emerges, brief and unremarkable in duration, placed from a public phone near the streetcar stop, traced not to Weiss, Mercer, Robert, or Riley, but to a number associated with a private investigator, a man named Victor Hale, whose business card appears buried in Elaine's purse, overlooked until now. Stone closes his eyes for a moment, absorbing the implication, because private investigators exist in the gray space between truth and exploitation, hired to expose but often entangled in what they uncover, and Keller's excitement returns, tempered now by caution, the understanding that each answer births new questions. They track Hale to a small office overlooking Market Street, its blinds perpetually half-closed, and when Hale answers their questions, he admits Elaine hired him to confirm her husband's fidelity, suspecting an affair that would justify leaving without moral compromise, and Stone feels the irony bite deep, the realization that Elaine sought proof not of betrayal but of permission, and when Hale admits meeting her the night she died to deliver inconclusive results, that he suggested confronting Robert directly, Stone understands how easily intentions can spiral, how advice, casually given, can redirect lives toward catastrophe. Hale insists he left Elaine alive, upset but resolute, and his timeline places him away from the waterfront at the critical moment, again frustrating the neatness of accusation. And as Stone and Keller step back into the street, the rain finally easing, Stone senses the case approaching its core, not a single monstrous act but a convergence of pressures, resentments, and expectations that narrowed Elaine's options until escape became impossible. Keller, quieter now, asks whether justice can ever account for such complexity, and Stone answers honestly that it cannot, that the law is a blunt instrument wielded against intricate human failures, but that they owe it to the dead to try anyway, to carve some measure of accountability from the chaos. The city exhales around them, indifferent yet complicit, and Stone knows that the truth, when it comes, will disappoint those who crave simple villains, because this story is not about one man breaking a vow, but about many people redefining it in ways that ultimately left Elaine alone at the edge of the bay, carrying the weight of promises that no longer fit. And as they head back to the office, Stone feels the familiar mix of resolve and dread, aware that the next step will demand choices that cannot be undone, that the case, like a marriage strained beyond repair, is approaching the moment where all pretense falls away, leaving only consequences in its wake. Morning arrives without ceremony, a pale wash of light sliding between buildings as if uncertain it is welcome, and Inspector Mike Stone feels the weight of the case settle into his bones before he even reaches the office, because now the investigation has crossed an invisible threshold, the point where accumulation of facts begins to demand interpretation rather than collection, and Steve Keller, already there, greets him with a look that mixes determination and fatigue, the look of a man beginning to understand that truth rarely announces itself cleanly. Victor Hale's involvement has shifted the moral geometry of the case, and Stone spends hours replaying Hale's statements, not searching for contradictions but for emphasis, for the places where language tightens or loosens under pressure, because he knows liars often hide not in what they say but in how they choose to say it, and when Keller suggests pushing Hale harder, Stone agrees but insists they first understand what Elaine Porter wanted from him, because motive, once clarified, has a way of illuminating actions that otherwise look random. Elaine's notes, retrieved from her apartment, reveal a careful mind wrestling with absolutes, pages filled with questions about obligation, loyalty, and the ethics of leaving something that is not overtly abusive but quietly suffocating, and Stone reads them slowly, recognizing the cadence of someone trying to negotiate with her own conscience, while Keller, initially impatient with introspection, begins to see how these internal debates could spill outward, pulling others into their gravity. The notes reference a final conversation, a phrase underlined twice, and Stone feels a chill, because finality often invites witnesses who would prefer to remain unseen, and when Keller cross-checks dates, the phrase aligns with the night of Elaine's death, suggesting she intended to confront someone, perhaps her husband, perhaps someone else whose influence had become unbearable. They return to Robert Porter, this time not as suspects seeking inconsistencies, but as observers of a man cornered by his own narrative, and when Stone mentions the private investigator, Robert's composure fractures, the mask slipping to reveal genuine shock that quickly curdles into indignation, his voice rising as he accuses Elaine of betrayal, of spying, and Stone watches the emotional pivot with interest, because outrage can be sincere or strategic, and sometimes it is both. Robert admits to arguing with Elaine that night, admits she confronted him about a suspected affair that did not exist, insists he left the apartment in anger to cool off, a walk he claims took him nowhere near the waterfront, and Keller presses for times, routes, witnesses, while Stone listens for what Robert does not say, noting the absence of remorse, the way Robert frames himself as the wronged party even in death. And Stone wonders whether resentment, left unexamined, can metastasize into something lethal without conscious intent. Afterward, Keller vents his frustration, accusing Robert of emotional violence, of creating a climate that made tragedy inevitable, and Stone does not disagree. But he reminds Keller that inevitability is not admissibility, that the law cannot prosecute atmosphere, only action. The case shifts again when Hale's phone records reveal a call placed not from a public phone, as he claimed, but from his office line earlier that evening, suggesting he may have shaped his timeline to distance himself from the waterfront, and Keller seizes on this discrepancy, eager to confront Hale with what feels like their first clean crack, and when they do, Hale's defensiveness spikes, his professional detachment giving way to irritation as he insists the call was misremembered, that the stress of the situation blurred details, and Stone sees the danger of memory under pressure. How easily self-protection can masquerade as confusion, still inconsistency. Alone does not equal guilt, and Stone urges caution even as Keller pushes for a warrant, reminding him that private investigators are skilled at obscuring trails, and that cornering one prematurely can collapse a fragile line of inquiry. Instead, Stone suggests they look at who else might have known about Elaine's plans, who might have had reason to intercept her before a confrontation could occur. And this leads them back to the community center, to volunteers who remember Elaine speaking of change, of transition, and one name surfaces repeatedly: Margaret Liu, a counselor who had become Elaine's confidant, offering guidance that straddled professional and personal boundaries. And when they meet Margaret, she speaks softly but firmly, acknowledging Elaine's turmoil, admitting she warned Elaine that confronting her husband could escalate matters, and Stone senses genuine concern, the kind that comes from experience rather than ideology. Margaret reveals something Elaine had not written down, a fear that someone was watching her, not threatening but persistent, a presence she could not quite identify, and Stone feels the pieces shift again, because surveillance introduces a new vector, one that extends beyond personal relationships into the realm of obsession. Checking Elaine's routine uncovers a pattern of being followed intermittently, sightings dismissed at the time as coincidence. And Keller's excitement returns, now tempered by a seriousness that suggests growth. Because this is no longer about assigning blame but about understanding behavior. The trail leads unexpectedly to Thomas Riley again, not as a dockworker but as a man who had hired Hale months earlier in an unrelated dispute, a fact Hale had neglected to mention, and when confronted, Hale admits the connection reluctantly, insisting the two cases never intersected, but Stone hears the strain, the effort required to keep compartments sealed that may have already leaked into one another. Riley's history of grievance, his simmering resentment toward Elaine, and his access to Hale create a web that feels increasingly relevant. And when Keller lays out the timeline, a plausible scenario emerges, one where Hale, under pressure from multiple clients, shared information carelessly, where Riley learned of Elaine's movements, and where obsession found opportunity. They bring Riley in again, this time armed with the knowledge of his connection to Hale, and the confrontation is different, less bluster, more calculation. As Riley realizes the perimeter is tightening, and under sustained questioning, his story frays, small inconsistencies appearing in his account of the evening, moments where his alibi relies on assumptions rather than witnesses, and Stone watches the shift with grim familiarity, knowing this is the point where truth either surfaces or hardens into permanent denial. Riley admits following Elaine, admits wanting to scare her, to make her understand the consequences of meddling, but denies intending harm, claiming the confrontation escalated when she threatened to go to the police, and Keller leans in, voice low, asking how strangulation fits into intimidation, and Riley's silence stretches, heavy and revealing, before he whispers that he panicked, that he lost control, and Stone feels the weight of inevitability settle, not as an abstract concept, but as the tragic culmination of unchecked anger and misplaced entitlement. The confession is partial, wrapped in self-justification, but it aligns with the evidence enough to satisfy the law, and as Riley is led away, Keller exhales, a mix of relief and disillusionment crossing his face, because resolution has arrived stripped of the moral clarity he once expected. Later, alone with Stone, Keller asks whether justice feels different now, whether closing a case ever brings peace. And Stone answers with the honesty earned through years of repetition, saying that justice is not a feeling, but a process, one that often leaves emotional debts unpaid. Paperwork follows, statements are filed, and the city absorbs the outcome with its usual indifference, headlines fading as quickly as they appear, and Stone stands at the window, watching fog reclaim the hills, thinking about Elaine Porter, about how many people touched her life without fully seeing her, about how vows spoken with certainty can dissolve under the slow erosion of misunderstanding, and he knows that this case will linger not because of its complexity but because of its ordinariness, the way it reflects patterns he has seen too many times to count. Keller, quieter now, seems older somehow, carrying the first real scar of the job, and Stone feels a muted satisfaction in knowing that the lesson, though painful, may keep his partner from mistaking simplicity for truth in the future. As they leave the office, the city hums around them, marriages forming and fracturing in apartments above bars, promises being renewed and broken without witnesses, and Stone thinks again of the ring found in the gutter, of how symbols endure even when the realities they represent collapse, and he understands that "till death do us part" is less a vow than a warning, a reminder that love, like the city, demands vigilance, humility, and the willingness to confront discomfort before it curdles into something irreparable. And as night settles in, Stone feels the case recede into memory, another story woven into the fabric of the streets he walks every day, leaving behind not closure but a quieter, heavier understanding of how easily lives can intersect and unravel when silence is mistaken for peace. After the confession is processed and the machinery of the law begins its slow, impersonal turn, the case refuses to release its hold on Inspector Mike Stone, because resolution, he has learned, is not the same as relief, and in the days that follow Thomas Riley's arrest, San Francisco seems to lean closer, as if the city itself wants to know what he will do with the knowledge now lodged inside him, the understanding that violence often arrives not as an eruption, but as a rationalized conclusion. And Stone walks the streets with this thought pressing against him, noticing how easily anger hides behind routine, how many people move through their days rehearsing arguments that never quite end. Steve Keller, meanwhile, throws himself into paperwork with a ferocity that suggests he is trying to outrun something, and Stone recognizes the pattern, the way young inspectors try to restore equilibrium by clinging to procedure, believing that if everything is filed correctly, the emotional residue will evaporate. But Stone knows better, knows that cases like this one lodge themselves in the joints and resurface years later in moments of quiet. The department treats the arrest as a success, commendations hinted at, supervisors satisfied that a volatile figure has been removed from circulation. And yet Stone feels an unease he cannot articulate, a sense that the story, while legally complete, remains morally unfinished because Riley's confession, though damning, explained the act without explaining the climate that made it possible, and Stone worries about the comfort such explanations provide, the way they allow institutions to declare victory without asking harder questions. Keller senses this too, and one evening, over cheap takeout eaten at desks long past closing hours, he asks Stone whether cases ever truly end, and Stone answers by telling him about a file he keeps at home, unofficial, filled with clippings and notes from investigations that, technically closed but never stopped speaking to him, cases that resurface in dreams or in the sudden recognition of a pattern on a stranger's face. And Keller listens, absorbing the implication that being a detective is less a job than a lifelong negotiation with unresolved narratives. Elaine Porter's name joins that internal archive almost immediately because Stone begins to see her everywhere. In women stepping off streetcars with purpose, in couples arguing quietly in cafes, in volunteers, handing out pamphlets with earnest conviction, and he realizes that what haunts him is not simply her death, but her effort to live honestly within constraints that punished honesty, an effort mirrored in countless lives the city contains but rarely acknowledges. Keller, for his part, begins revisiting earlier interviews in his mind, questioning his own assumptions, replaying moments where he pushed too hard or dismissed nuance too quickly. And Stone watches this introspection with a mixture of concern and respect, knowing that self-doubt can either corrode or refine, depending on how it is handled. The trial date is set, headlines flare briefly, and then the case recedes from public attention, replaced by fresher tragedies, but Stone attends the hearings anyway, sitting in the back of the courtroom where he can observe without being observed, watching Riley's posture, his attempts at contrition, his lawyer's careful framing of the crime as a momentary lapse rather than a culmination of choices, and Stone feels a familiar anger stir, not at the legal strategy itself, but at the cultural appetite for minimizing accountability when it threatens to implicate broader systems of belief. Elaine's family testifies, their grief restrained yet unmistakable, and Stone finds himself focusing on small details, the way her mother grips the edge of the witness stand, the way her sister's voice tightens when describing Elaine's optimism, and he thinks about how victims are often flattened into symbols during trials, their complexity reduced to narrative convenience, and he resolves quietly to remember Elaine as she was revealed through the investigation, contradictory, searching, human. Keller attends as well, initially stiff, uncomfortable with the courtroom's performative nature, but gradually he begins to understand its role, flawed yet necessary, and afterward he admits to Stone that seeing the process unfold has altered his understanding of justice, shifting it from an abstract principle to a lived, imperfect practice that demands endurance as much as conviction. Outside the courthouse, life continues with indecent normalcy, tourists snapping photos, vendors hawking pretzels, couples holding hands, and Stone is struck again by the city's capacity to absorb pain without slowing down, to incorporate tragedy into its rhythm until it becomes just another undertone. And he wonders whether this resilience is strength or denial, whether the city's beauty anesthetizes its conscience. In the weeks that follow, Stone returns to mentoring Keller more deliberately, using the case as a touchstone for discussions about ethics, about the limits of empathy, about the danger of conflating understanding with excusal, and Keller listens with an attentiveness that suggests the lessons are landing, that the case has indeed left a mark that may shape his career in ways Stone can only hope are constructive. One afternoon, they revisit the waterfront together. Not as investigators, but as observers, standing where Elaine's life ended, and Keller remarks on how unremarkable the spot looks now, how easily it blends into the surrounding landscape, and Stone responds that this is often how violence hides, in places stripped of significance by repetition, and he tells Keller that remembering is an active choice, one that must be renewed or it dissolves into abstraction. The ring found in the gutter is returned to Elaine's family, and Stone attends the quiet exchange, watching as the object passes from evidence bag to trembling hand, its inscription catching the light briefly before disappearing into a purse, and he feels the strange finality of that moment, the way symbols outlive the stories we attach to them, carrying meanings that shift with context. Keller later admits that the ring bothers him more than any other aspect of the case, because it represents intention, a promise made sincerely even if it could not be kept, and Stone agrees, adding that sincerity does not guarantee durability, that vows are not contracts but aspirations vulnerable to the slow erosion of neglect. The department moves on, assigning Stone and Keller to new cases, each demanding attention, each threatening to overwrite the last. But Stone notices that Keller approaches these investigations differently now, with a measured patience that tempers his earlier urgency. And Stone feels a quiet satisfaction, recognizing the subtle transmission of wisdom that defines mentorship more than any formal commendation. Still late at night, Stone sometimes dreams of Elaine walking the streets alone, the city unfolding around her like a question she cannot answer, and he wakes with the understanding that some stories persist not because they are unresolved, but because they illuminate truths we would rather ignore, truths about how easily good intentions can become liabilities, how systems designed to protect can fail silently, and how the absence of overt cruelty does not equal the presence of care. One evening, as fog rolls in and the city lights blur into halos, Keller asks Stone whether he regrets staying on the force so long, whether the accumulation of such cases weighs too heavily, and Stone answers honestly that there are days when the weight feels unbearable, when the knowledge of what people do to each other presses down with suffocating force, but that there are also moments, rare but sustaining, when understanding prevents harm, when patience saves a life, when a conversation alters a trajectory, and that these moments, though seldom acknowledged, are what keep him walking the streets. Elaine Porter's case becomes one of those internal reference points, a reminder that the work is not about heroism or closure but about attention, about seeing people clearly even when doing so reveals uncomfortable truths, and as Stone and Keller continue their partnership, navigating the city's endless supply of fractured narratives, Stone carries forward the lesson etched into that discarded ring, not as a romantic ideal but as a sober warning, understanding now more than ever that, till death do us part, is not merely a promise whispered at an altar, but a test renewed daily in the small, often unnoticed choices that either sustain connection or allow it to decay into something dangerous. And as the fog thickens and the streets glisten under streetlights, Stone walks on, attentive, resolute, aware that the city will keep offering stories like this one, and that his task, until he can no longer perform it, is to listen carefully enough to hear what they are really saying before silence claims them entirely. Time moves forward in the precinct the way it does in the city itself, unevenly, surging with urgency one moment and stalling in bureaucratic stillness the next, and for Inspector Mike Stone the weeks after the Porter case feel oddly suspended, as if the conclusion has created a pocket of quiet where reflection seeps in despite his efforts to keep moving, because new files land on his desk, new crimes demand attention. Yet Elaine Porter's story continues to echo beneath them, shaping his perceptions in subtle ways he does not immediately name. Steve Keller senses this undercurrent too, and though he says little, Stone notices the change in his partner's posture during interrogations, the way he pauses before pressing a suspect, allowing silence to do more work than accusation, and Stone recognizes this as growth born not of instruction, but of lived consequence, the kind that cannot be rushed or faked. The department assigns them to a series of domestic disputes that escalate. Unpredictably, cases dismissed by some as routine, but which Stone approaches with renewed seriousness, because he now hears the warning signs more clearly, the coded language of resentment and fear that often precedes violence. And he insists Keller attend carefully to these moments, not just as potential evidence, but as human signals demanding intervention before harm becomes irreversible. One case in particular lingers: a middle-aged couple in the outer Sunset whose arguments have grown louder but whose injuries remain invisible. And as Stone listens to the woman speak in halting fragments about control and obligation, he feels the same tightening he felt reading Elaine's notes, the recognition of someone negotiating internally with a vow that no longer protects her. And though the law offers limited tools, Stone pushes for resources, for counseling, for temporary separation, understanding that prevention rarely looks heroic, but often requires persistence without praise. Keller observes this with a seriousness that suggests he is recalibrating his understanding of success, shifting from arrests to outcomes less measurable but potentially more profound. Outside the office, Stone's personal life remains spare, defined by routine and solitude, and yet he finds himself revisiting old memories with new eyes, re-examining the end of his own marriage not as a failure of endurance, but as a mutual inability to articulate needs before they hardened into resentment. And this reframing unsettles him, because it implies responsibility rather than inevitability, and Stone has spent years protecting himself with the belief that some endings are unavoidable. The city, indifferent to his introspection, continues to offer its theater of contradictions, beauty brushing up against decay, intimacy colliding with anonymity, and Stone walks its streets with a sharpened awareness of how easily private despair disappears into public noise. Keller, increasingly comfortable, voicing his uncertainties, asks Stone one evening whether he believes people can truly change or whether patterns simply repeat with different actors, and Stone answers cautiously, acknowledging that change is possible but rare, often requiring disruption severe enough to break old scripts, and that without such disruption, people tend to default to familiar roles even when those roles cause harm. This conversation lingers between them as they take on a new investigation involving a missing woman whose husband insists she left voluntarily, a claim Stone treats with skepticism informed by experience. And as they piece together the woman's life, Stone notices Keller resisting the temptation to rush to judgment, instead mapping pressures and dependencies with patient care, and Stone feels a quiet affirmation that mentorship, when effective, reproduces itself invisibly. The missing woman is eventually found alive, having fled an environment that was not overtly violent but relentlessly diminishing, and when she thanks Stone and Keller for taking her seriously, Stone feels a rare, grounding sense of alignment, a moment where effort intersects with impact, and he carries this with him as evidence that attention, though insufficient to undo past tragedies, can still alter future trajectories. Yet even these moments of validation do not erase the darker realizations seeded by the Porter case, and Stone continues to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that the systems surrounding marriage, work, and masculinity often conspire to normalize quiet harm until it explodes, and he wonders how many Elaines exist beyond the reach of intervention, negotiating silently until the weight becomes too much. Keller's own life reflects this growing awareness, as he begins to speak of his relationships with more caution, questioning assumptions he once accepted uncritically. And Stone listens without offering prescriptive advice, understanding that self-discovery cannot be outsourced. The department announces a restructuring that will likely reassign partners, a reminder that even the most effective collaborations are subject to institutional reshuffling, and Stone feels a flicker of resistance, the prospect of losing Keller stirring an unexpected protectiveness, because their partnership has evolved beyond professional convenience into something more nuanced. A shared language forged through cases like Elaine's, Keller, sensing this shift, asks directly whether Stone would recommend staying on the streets long-term or pursuing advancement, and Stone answers honestly that advancement offers insulation but distance, that staying close to the streets preserves clarity at the cost of wear, and that neither path guarantees satisfaction, only different kinds of compromise. The conversation is interrupted by a call pulling them back into action, and as they respond, Stone notes how seamlessly Keller transitions from reflection to focus. A balance Stone himself struggled to achieve early in his career. The new case unfolds with familiar patterns, jealousy, financial stress, unspoken expectations, and Stone applies lessons learned not by tightening control, but by widening perspective, exploring secondary narratives rather than anchoring prematurely to a single theory, and Keller mirrors this approach, their collaboration now marked by an unspoken patience that allows complexity to surface. Late one night, after filing reports. Stone finds himself alone again, the office quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights, and he opens the drawer where he keeps personal mementos, adding a small note about the Porter case not as evidence but as reminder. A private acknowledgement that some investigations function less as puzzles to be solved and more as mirrors reflecting societal fractures. He writes about the danger of silence, about the false comfort of endurance, about how vows, when treated as immutable rather than negotiated, can become weapons wielded unintentionally, and he closes the drawer with a sense of solemn continuity, knowing this record is for no one but himself, a way of maintaining integrity in a profession that often rewards detachment. Keller stops by his desk before leaving, hesitating as if weighing a question, then admits that he sometimes fears becoming numb, that exposure to so much pain risks flattening empathy into procedure, and Stone tells him that numbness is not the absence of feeling but a signal that feeling has overwhelmed capacity, that the task is not to eliminate emotion but to pace it, to build rituals of release and reflection that prevent accumulation from turning corrosive. Keller nods, absorbing this with the seriousness of someone beginning to understand longevity, and as they leave together, the city air cool and damp, Stone feels a rare sense of continuity, the reassurance that the work, though imperfect, is being carried forward with increasing care. Elaine Porter's presence remains not as a specter but as a calibration point, a reminder that behind every file lies a network of choices shaped by culture, expectation, and silence, and Stone resolves quietly to keep listening for what is not said, to treat ambiguity not as an obstacle but as essential context. The streets stretch out before them, familiar yet newly inflected with meaning, and Stone walks them with a steadier pace, aware that while he cannot prevent every tragedy, he can honor the lessons left behind by those who did not survive their negotiations with promise and restraint, and in doing so, he sustains a form of fidelity not to institutions or ideals, but to the fragile human realities that continue to unfold, unnoticed, beneath the city's restless motion. After Keller's transfer becomes official, the rhythm of Inspector Mike Stone's days changes in ways that are subtle yet pervasive, like a familiar song played in a different key, and although the streets remain the same, their contours now feel altered by absence. The silence beside him in the patrol car louder than any conversation, and Stone finds himself acutely aware of habits formed over years of partnership. The instinct to glance sideways for confirmation, to shape a thought aloud, knowing it will be challenged or refined, habits that now must be reconfigured rather than indulged. His new temporary partner, Inspector Ray Donovan, is competent and courteous, a man with a solid record and a pragmatic outlook. But the chemistry is provisional, professional rather than intuitive, and Stone recognizes the difference immediately, understanding that while skill can be reassigned, trust accrues slowly. Sedimented through shared pressure and consequence, Donovan prefers efficiency to reflection, clean narratives to layered ones, and although Stone respects this approach, he feels the tension between speed and depth more keenly now, especially after cases like Elaine Porter's have recalibrated his sense of what thoroughness truly demands. Their first major case together involves a suspected suicide in a downtown hotel, a man found hanging in a room paid for with cash, no note, minimal belongings, and Donovan is quick to accept the surface explanation, citing statistics and precedent, while Stone insists on walking the surrounding blocks, speaking with hotel staff, understanding the man's movements in the hours before his death, because he has learned that endings often lie about their origins. This insistence initially irritates Donovan, who views it as unnecessary delay, but as inconsistencies emerge, a misplaced wallet, a witness who recalls an argument in the hallway, a phone call erased but partially traceable, Donovan begins to see the value of Stone's patience, and Stone, for his part, is reminded that mentorship does not end with Keller. That experience carries an obligation to be shared even when it is not explicitly requested. The case ultimately confirms suicide, but not before revealing layers of financial pressure and quiet humiliation that contextualize the act, and Stone feels the familiar mixture of validation and melancholy, knowing that understanding does not equate to prevention, yet still matters as an act of respect, outside of work. Stone's evenings stretch longer, unstructured, and he fills them with walks through neighborhoods he once rushed past, noticing details previously absorbed unconsciously. The cadence of voices drifting from open windows, the ritual of couples arguing softly on stoops, the laughter that feels both intimate and performative, and he thinks often of Elaine Porter in these moments, imagining how many such scenes she navigated while weighing decisions that felt impossible to articulate. The city, in its endless variation, becomes a text Stone reads more carefully now, searching for patterns not to impose order, but to recognize warning signs. And he begins to keep informal notes again, scribbling observations about the way stress manifests differently across social strata, about how economic pressure sharpens conflicts that might otherwise dissipate, about how masculinity, unexamined, often expresses itself through control rather than communication. These notes do not belong in reports, but they shape his approach, influencing the questions he asks, the silences he allows, the resources he suggests even when not strictly required. Keller remains present in Stone's life through occasional conversations, brief calls that bridge their diverging professional worlds, and Stone listens as Keller describes the strategic complexity of organized crime work. The abstraction of long-term investigations where individual victims blur into patterns of influence. And although Keller speaks with enthusiasm, Stone hears the undercurrent of adjustment, the effort required to maintain moral clarity amid layers of compromise, and he offers what guidance he can, reminding Keller to anchor himself in specific human consequences even when working at scale. One call, in particular, lingers with Stone, Keller admitting that he sometimes misses the immediacy of street-level work, the direct confrontation with harm and resolution, and Stone tells him that longing is natural, that each phase of a career carries its own losses, and that awareness of those losses is itself a form of integrity. Meanwhile, Stone's new cases continue to echo themes of erosion and silence, a string of investigations involving long-term relationships that have hollowed out without overt collapse, and he finds himself increasingly attentive to what is not reported, the domestic tensions that never reach police logs until they explode, and he begins collaborating more closely with social workers and community advocates, recognizing that law enforcement alone cannot address the conditions that incubate violence. This interdisciplinary approach meets resistance from some colleagues who view it as mission drift, but Stone persists, drawing on the credibility earned through decades of service, and he frames these efforts not as ideological but as pragmatic, arguing that prevention, though less visible, ultimately conserves resources and lives. One afternoon, he is called to mediate a conflict. At a senior housing complex, a dispute between long-married residents whose arguments have escalated into threats, and as Stone listens to their grievances, he hears echoes of Elaine's questions, the struggle to reconcile commitment with personal survival, and he approaches the situation not as an enforcer but as a facilitator, acknowledging the legitimacy of exhaustion without endorsing harm, and when the couple agrees, tentatively, to separate living arrangements, Stone feels a quiet affirmation, a sense that intervention, though modest, has altered a trajectory that might otherwise have turned tragic. These moments sustain him even as institutional pressures mount, budget constraints tightening, performance metrics emphasizing clearance rates over qualitative outcomes, and Stone feels the familiar tension between what is measured and what matters, a tension that has defined his career but now feels more acute as he approaches a stage where legacy begins to matter more than advancement. He declines a suggestion to move into an administrative role, choosing instead to remain in the field, a decision that surprises some but feels inevitable to him, because distance from the streets would dull the very awareness he has worked to cultivate, and he is unwilling to trade immediacy for insulation, even as the physical toll of the work becomes harder to ignore. His body reminds him of its limits in small ways, stiffness in the mornings, a slower recovery after long shifts, and he adjusts his routines accordingly, pacing himself, accepting help when offered, and recognizing that endurance requires adaptation rather than denial. The city responds to these adjustments with its usual indifference, offering beauty and brutality in equal measure, and Stone walks its streets with a steadier, more deliberate pace, aware that time is no longer an abstract resource, but a finite one to be allocated intentionally. Elaine Porter's case, though now several months past, resurfaces unexpectedly when Stone is contacted by a journalist researching domestic violence patterns, seeking insight into how seemingly stable marriages can conceal lethal dynamics, and Stone agrees to speak off the record, careful not to sensationalize but willing to articulate the systemic blind spots that allow such tragedies to unfold. And as he speaks, he feels a cautious optimism that articulation itself can function as intervention, that naming patterns may disrupt their normalization. The interview prompts reflection, and Stone revisits his notes from the case, rereading Elaine's questions with fresh eyes, seeing not indecision but courage in her attempt to interrogate inherited narratives, and he resolves to honor that courage by continuing to challenge assumptions within his sphere of influence, however limited. Keller reads the resulting article and calls Stone, thanking him for giving language to concerns he has struggled to articulate in his new role, and Stone feels a quiet satisfaction, recognizing that influence, like mentorship, extends beyond direct contact. As summer approaches, the city's mood shifts subtly, energy rising, conflicts intensifying under longer days, and Stone remains vigilant, aware that heat amplifies tension, that thresholds for restraint lower as discomfort increases, and he adjusts patrol strategies accordingly, emphasizing visibility and early engagement. Through it all, he maintains his private ritual of walking the waterfront at dusk, a practice begun unconsciously after Elaine's death and now sustained deliberately, a way of grounding himself in continuity, of acknowledging loss without allowing it to calcify into despair. Standing there, watching the water absorb light and shadow, Stone thinks about vows again, not as static declarations but as ongoing negotiations with reality, and he recognizes that his own commitment to attentiveness, to restraint, to humane practice, is a kind of vow renewed daily through choice. Rather than ceremony, the city hums behind him, restless, indifferent, alive, and Stone turns back toward it with a sense of measured resolve, aware that while he cannot rewrite past stories, he can influence how future ones unfold by listening more closely, intervening earlier, and refusing the comfort of simple explanations. This awareness does not lighten the work, but it steadies it, providing a framework within which complexity can be held without collapsing into cynicism. As he walks back into the flow of the streets, Stone carries forward not closure but continuity, the understanding that meaning in this work is not found in endings but in sustained presence, and that each case, each conversation, each quiet redirection contributes incrementally to a city that rarely notices such efforts, yet is subtly shaped by them. And in this incremental shaping, Stone finds enough purpose to continue, attentive and unresolved, as the streets of San Francisco offer their next, inevitable story. Spring announces itself tentatively in San Francisco, not through warmth so much as through subtle permissions, longer light lingering at the edges of the day, rain softening rather than scouring, and Inspector Mike Stone senses this shift as a loosening inside his own rhythms, a cautious allowance for renewal that does not erase the weight of winter but redistributes it. And as the city stretches, so too does the scope of his attention, now attuned not only to crises but to the quieter recalibrations that follow them. The Morales case moves steadily through pretrial hearings, procedural rather than revelatory, yet Stone attends several sessions anyway, not out of obligation but out of a private commitment to continuity, wanting to bear witness to the full arc of a story he helped redirect, and as he watches Marco Morales across the courtroom, diminished by circumstance yet still resistant to full accountability, Stone reflects on how justice, when mediated through systems, often arrives stripped of the emotional resonance people expect, offering resolution without catharsis, and he reminds himself that this dissonance does not invalidate the process but reveals its limits. Lydia Morales's family approaches him after one hearing, expressing gratitude with a restraint born of exhaustion, and Stone responds simply, careful not to claim more credit than is warranted, understanding that acknowledgement, when understated, can be more sincere than reassurance. This interaction lingers with him as he returns to the precinct, reinforcing his sense that presence, even when it cannot repair loss, carries its own quiet significance. Professionally, Stone's role continues to evolve, less defined now by the volume of cases he carries than by the depth of his involvement in shaping how they are approached, and he is asked to contribute to a departmental review of domestic violence protocols, a task that requires translating lived experience into language that can withstand bureaucratic scrutiny, and he approaches this work with characteristic patience, grounding recommendations in specific cases, anonymized but detailed, emphasizing early indicators, interagency collaboration, and the importance of officer discretion informed by empathy rather than assumption. The process is slow, meetings layered with competing priorities and institutional inertia, yet Stone persists, framing his arguments not as reformist critique, but as operational refinement, and he senses incremental progress in the willingness of decision-makers to engage seriously with nuance. Ray Donovan becomes an unexpected ally in this effort, offering pragmatic insights that bridge Stone's qualitative focus with quantitative demands, and Stone appreciates this partnership, recognizing that effective change often requires coalition rather than consensus. Outside the precinct, Stone's engagement with the city takes on new textures, and he begins volunteering quietly at a community mediation center once a month, not as a police officer but as a trained listener, participating in supervised dialogues between neighbors, family members, and co-workers navigating conflict. And he finds the experience both humbling and affirming, stripped of authority yet rich in human complexity, reinforcing his belief that many disputes labeled criminal are, at their core, failures of communication compounded by fear. He does not publicize this work, wary of perceptions of overreach, but it informs his policing subtly, sharpening his sensitivity to tone and pacing, reminding him that resolution often emerges not from decisive intervention, but from sustained attention. Keller visits San Francisco briefly during this period, in town for a federal coordination meeting, and the two meet for coffee near the Embarcadero, their conversation unhurried, marked by the easy familiarity of long partnership reshaped by distance. And Keller speaks candidly about the strain of his current work, the abstraction of harm into charts and indictments, the challenge of maintaining moral orientation amid strategic compromise. And Stone listens, offering neither platitudes nor prescriptions, instead sharing his own uncertainties, acknowledging that no assignment grants immunity from doubt. They walk together along the waterfront afterward, discussing cases past and present, and Stone senses in Keller a renewed grounding, as though the physical return to familiar streets has reactivated something essential, and he understands then that places, like people, can function as anchors, holding identity steady amid change. This realization resonates personally as Stone contemplates his own future, now a more frequent subject of internal dialogue, retirement no longer a distant abstraction but a tangible horizon, and he considers what stepping away might mean, not in terms of leisure, but in terms of identity, the challenge of relinquishing a role that has structured his perception of the world for decades. He does not rush these thoughts, recognizing that premature decisions often stem from fatigue rather than readiness, and he allows the question to remain open, trusting that clarity will arrive through accumulation rather than epiphany. The city tests his steadiness once more with a complex case involving an elderly man accused of killing his longtime partner, circumstances clouded by dementia, caregiver burnout, and ambiguous intent, and Stone approaches the investigation with deliberate care, consulting medical experts, advocating for psychological evaluations, and resisting simplistic narratives of villainy or victimhood. And as the case unfolds, he is struck again by how aging introduces new dimensions to familiar patterns of control and dependence, complicating notions of culpability, and he ensures that the investigative approach reflects this complexity, even as external pressure mounts for decisive framing. The outcome, when it arrives, is legally unsatisfying to some, morally ambiguous to all, yet Stone feels that the process honored the reality of the situation, refusing to collapse it into convenience, and he accepts this as a measure of success, however uncelebrated. Internally, the department continues to shift, younger officers cycling in with different expectations, more conversant with data analytics and public accountability, and Stone adapts, engaging with these tools without surrendering his emphasis on narrative understanding, and he mentors selectively now, choosing depth over breadth, investing in those receptive to nuance, and he takes quiet satisfaction in watching them integrate these perspectives into their own practice, knowing that influence often operates invisibly. The Whitaker couple resurfaces once more in his awareness through a brief update from a mediator, informing him that they have decided to separate amicably, pursuing individual counseling, and although Stone is not directly involved, the news resonates deeply, offering a counterpoint to the tragedies that dominate his memory, a reminder that intervention, when timely and restrained, can alter trajectories toward less destructive ends. This knowledge does not breed complacency but steadies him, reinforcing his commitment to early engagement even when outcomes remain uncertain. Spring advances, the city brightening, tensions easing slightly, and Stone notices a corresponding lightness in his own demeanor, moments of quiet humor returning to his interactions, a sign not of detachment but of balance restored, and he allows himself these moments without guilt, recognizing that resilience includes the capacity for levity. One afternoon, while reviewing old case files as part of the protocol review, Stone revisits Elaine Porter's notes once more, and this time he reads them not as an investigator seeking missed signals, but as a man acknowledging the limits of foresight, and he reframes the case within his personal narrative not as a failure but as a formative catalyst, a moment that sharpened his awareness and redirected his practice, and this reframing brings a measure of peace, not absolution but integration. The season culminates in a departmental commendation ceremony where Stone is unexpectedly recognized for his contributions to interagency collaboration and mentorship. And as he stands before colleagues, applause measured but sincere, he feels a complex mixture of gratitude and discomfort, wary of accolades yet appreciative of acknowledgement, and he responds with characteristic brevity, emphasizing collective effort and the ongoing nature of the work, and afterward he retreats quietly, letting the moment pass without expansion. Later that evening, he returns to the waterfront alone, the air mild, the water reflecting the city's lights with gentle distortion, and he thinks again of vows, of promises made explicitly or implicitly, to partners, to professions, to principles, and he recognizes that his enduring commitment has been less to outcomes than to process, to the discipline of attention, to the willingness to remain present amid ambiguity. He understands now that this commitment has shaped not only his career but his character, tempering judgment with humility, authority with restraint, and he accepts this shaping as his true legacy, one not easily summarized but deeply lived. As he turns back toward the city, footsteps steady, posture relaxed. Yet alert, Stone feels a quiet readiness for whatever remains, aware that an ending approaches but not yet, and that until it does, his place is here within the unresolved, engaging fully with each story as it unfolds, not seeking finality but honoring continuity. And in this ongoing engagement, he finds meaning enough to continue walking the streets of San Francisco, attentive, seasoned, and quietly resolute. The final turn of the year arrives not as a dramatic closing, but as a gentle narrowing, days shortening imperceptibly, routines compressing around essentials, and Inspector Mike Stone becomes increasingly aware that the city is no longer asking him to prove anything, only to remain present, to finish what he has begun with the same deliberation that has come to define his work. And this awareness lends his movements a calm gravity, each step measured not by urgency but by intention. The Morales case reaches its conclusion in early summer, a plea agreement shaped by evidence and negotiation rather than courtroom theater, and although the sentence feels inadequate to some, excessive to others, Stone experiences it as he has learned to experience such outcomes, neither triumph nor defeat, but a procedural acknowledgement of truth that will never fully align with moral intuition, and he attends the final hearing quietly, sitting in the back, observing faces rather than verdicts, noting the subtle release in Lydia Morales' sister as the gavel falls, not relief but an easing of tension, the permission to grieve without waiting for resolution, and Stone understands that this, too, is a form of justice rarely recorded. Afterward, he walks alone through Civic Center Plaza, the sound of traffic and footsteps blending into a familiar urban hum, and he reflects on how many times he has traversed this ground in the aftermath of endings that never felt complete, and how, over time, he has learned to accept incompleteness not as failure but as condition. Back at the precinct, administrative shifts accelerate, new leadership emphasizing modernization, data-driven strategies, and public transparency, and Stone engages constructively, offering institutional memory as context rather than resistance, aware that relevance depends on adaptability, and he contributes where his experience adds value, particularly in discussions about discretion, warning against over-reliance on metrics. Divorced from situational nuance, and although not all his cautions are adopted, he senses respect in the listening, a recognition that evolution need not erase precedent. Ray Donovan, now fully integrated into his role, thanks Stone one evening for his mentorship in a manner both understated and sincere, acknowledging that his perspective has altered how Donovan approaches scenes, especially those involving domestic conflict, and Stone receives this gratitude with quiet appreciation, understanding that influence realized in others outlasts personal accomplishment. Keller remains a steady, if distant, presence, their conversations now less frequent but more distilled. And in one call, Keller shares his decision to step away from a high-profile task force assignment, choosing instead a role that allows greater ethical clarity, and Stone hears in this choice an echo of his own values, a continuity that reassures him that their shared principles have not been diluted by divergent paths. As summer unfolds, Stone begins the formal process of planning his retirement, not yet announcing it publicly, but consulting quietly with human resources, mapping timelines, considering how to transition cases and responsibilities without disruption. And this planning feels less like withdrawal than stewardship, an extension of his commitment to continuity. And he approaches it with the same care he brings to investigations, anticipating gaps, mitigating risk, ensuring that knowledge is transferred rather than lost. The prospect of life beyond the badge stirs unexpected emotions, not fear so much as curiosity tinged with melancholy, and Stone experiments with imagining days unstructured by calls and reports, days oriented around observation rather than intervention, and he finds the idea neither liberating nor oppressive, but ambiguous, and he allows that ambiguity to exist without demand for resolution. The city continues its work regardless, presenting Stone with one last complex case that feels almost deliberately tailored to his sensibilities, a long-married couple discovered in a state of mutual harm after years of quiet isolation. No clear aggressor, no clean narrative, and Stone oversees the response with the full weight of his experience, ensuring compassion without abdication of responsibility, precision without haste, and as the investigation unfolds, he recognizes elements of every case that has shaped him. Elaine Porter's silences, the Whitaker's exhaustion, Lydia Morales's fear, woven together into a tapestry that resists simplification, and he guides his team through this complexity not by providing answers, but by modeling process, demonstrating how to hold competing truths without collapsing them into convenience. When the case is resolved through a combination of medical intervention and legal oversight rather than traditional prosecution, Stone feels a profound sense of alignment, not because the outcome is ideal, but because it reflects a maturity of approach he has spent years cultivating within the department. This case, more than any commendation, feels like a valediction, an affirmation that the values he has embodied have taken root beyond his individual presence. In his personal life, Stone begins to let go of certain rituals even as he holds on to others, reducing his waterfront walks not out of loss of interest, but out of a desire to make space for new rhythms. Yet he returns there one evening near the end of summer, standing where water meets light, and he reflects on vows one final time, recognizing that the phrase "till death do us part" has less to do with permanence than with perseverance, with the daily choice to remain engaged until separation becomes inevitable, whether from a person, a role, or a phase of life. He realizes that his vow has been to attentiveness itself, to seeing clearly and acting humanely for as long as he is able, and that this vow does not end with retirement, but transforms, redirecting its focus rather than dissolving it. The department announces his impending retirement quietly, without fanfare, and colleagues respond with a mixture of respect and understated regret, and a small gathering is organized, speeches brief and sincere, emphasizing Stone's steadiness, his restraint, his influence, and as he listens he feels a gentle detachment, aware that the words describe a version of him already receding, and he accepts this without resistance. Understanding that identity, like service, is temporal, Keller attends, their reunion marked by shared glances more than words, and afterward they walk together through familiar streets, reminiscing selectively, avoiding sentimentality, and when they part, Stone feels no sense of loss, only gratitude for continuity sustained across change. On his final official day, Stone completes his paperwork, clears his desk, and walks through the precinct one last time, noting details with the attentiveness that has always defined him, the hum of conversation, the tension beneath routine, the quiet resolve in faces both new and familiar, and he leaves behind not instructions but presence, a template embodied rather than written. Stepping outside, he pauses, feeling the city's pulse as he always has, no longer as an inspector but not yet as something else, and he understands that the streets will continue without him, absorbing new stories, new tragedies, new acts of restraint and harm, and he feels neither replaced nor irrelevant, only complete. Later that evening, Stone returns to the waterfront once more, not out of habit but intention, and as the sun lowers, casting long reflections across the bay, he stands quietly, allowing memory and anticipation to coexist, and he recognizes that endings, like investigations, rarely conclude with certainty but with acceptance, the acknowledgement that meaning resides not in closure but in sustained engagement, turning away at last. Stone walks back into the city not as a guardian or witness, but as a participant among many, carrying with him the discipline of attention, the humility of experience, and the quiet resolve that has shaped his life. And as the lights come on one by one across San Francisco, he knows that although his formal watch has ended, the vow he lived by endures, transformed but intact, binding him not to duty but to humanity itself, and in this enduring commitment, he finds peace enough to let the streets continue telling their stories without him, confident that he has listened well, acted honestly, and remained present until the moment of parting arrived, naturally and without regret.